A Dark Song is a 2016 released horror film written and directed by Liam Gavin.
Yes, it stars Catherine Walker as Sophia, whose son was murdered, I think a couple of years before the film takes place, and she's desperate to get in touch with him, on the other side. And she employs the skills of occultist Joseph Solomon, who's played by Steve Oram. They shut themselves away in a country house, and he takes her through various different rituals and occult things in order to contact the other side, so she can talk to her dead son. And that's it. It's basically a two-hander. They're pretty much the only two characters you see, apart from a couple of other people you see at the start. And almost the entire film is set in this one house, with them doing all these different rituals and trying to invoke spirits and demons and things to move them through different planes of the afterlife, I suppose. Yeah. So and I think the ultimate aim is to bring down her guardian angel, so she can then ask it a favour to talk to her son. But it's apparent from the outset that they're both maybe not being quite honest with each other, despite the insistence by Joseph that they need to be completely honest. He needs to know exactly why they're doing it, and that her intentions are pure. And
yes, you mustn't mess with the forces of darkness.
Quite exactly, and I think he's probably right about that. But so it's and that's it. They're much of the film is taken up with them going through these various steps of how you contact these various spirits and things, and gradually, at first she gets frustrated because nothing seems to be happening, but then gradually little things do start to happen, and at first you're kind of like, he said, I think a bird hits a window, and he says, "Oh, that's it. It's starting now." And you're like, "Really?" You start to, as the viewer, you start to question, whether he's just taking her for a ride. But it's more stuff happens, and it's quite clear that no, it's not. Real strange, weird, occult, spiritual things are happening. I think what really sells it is that because he's just a normal guy. He's not in a lot of films when you. Sorry, go on.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't come dressed in robes.
No.
And antlers.
No.
He comes. He looks like, I think the first shot you see him of him, she's on the train station. The train pulls apart, and he's like sitting there in an anorak and a pair of trainers and a beanie, and he just looks like
just a normal bloke.
Really. And yes, so you carry on.
Yeah, I think it just helps you really buy into the film because it is just a normal guy presenting all these weird things, and he just says it in such a matter-of-fact way that you just, as a viewer, I think you're able to just buy into it far easier.
Or not, actually, because if you look at people who are into kind of mysticism, and people like Alan Moore, and so people like this are usually quite eccentric.
Well, but
and I could personally maybe buy into someone who is slightly eccentric than maybe someone who just looks like a train spotter.
Well, it's just Alan Moore, isn't he? Let's be honest.
But personally I did quite like that he was quite normal and down to earth but he was.
I think if you had someone dressed in a long black coat and a weird hat and spoke, it would just be like everything else, really.
Well,
the fact that he's just a normal guy,
and also that I suppose, and we'll start talking about the actual film now.
Yes.
But move away from the plot. But I guess for me personally, I did buy into that, and because I thought it was actually going a different route to the film actually went, because it's obviously Steve Oram Stephen Oram. Who I only personally know from Sightseers, which is a fantastic film and one of my favourite of Ben Wheatley's. And he's kind of playing a similar character in that.
Yeah,
similar.
Of. Yeah,
it's a bit dry humour, a bit
of a
cynical, a bit of a miserable bloke. Very sarcastic, typical British humour, I suppose. He does it really well, and he's doing a similar kind of thing in here. So for me, on what I thought about this film, I'd never seen this film before. And I had heard of it, but I didn't know much about it. I think you mentioned it, and then he was in it. I was like, okay, that sounds quite interesting. And I enjoyed it, but I hated the ending. Obviously, we don't do spoilers, so it's tricky to talk about that. But I really did not like the ending at all. And we've mentioned this again in the past that I do love horror films, and I've seen a lot of horror films, and films that when they just kind of, a lot of, some, not all, but some, a lot of modern films, modern horror films, I feel like they can't hold it right to the end of the film, or it's just that's their vision for the end of the film, and it just doesn't work on me personally. But the whole setup of this film, I actually really liked, and I thought it was going. So kind of the whole setup kind of feels like you've got this. There's a lot of kind of submission, domination thing going on. He's quite controlling. Is he controlling her? They're both lonely, vulnerable people. Then obviously she's kind of the cliche horror. Mother with lost child. That's a very strong thing that's happened in a lot of horror films over the years. I mean, Don't Look Now, and Rosemary's Baby, and kind of The Shining, I suppose. There is the mother and child relationship in there. Those kind of horror tropes that have been used time and time again. So that's very familiar territory. Then there's him, and he's playing this kind of occultist. And I did like. What I really liked about it, because I'm a big fan of British horror. I'm a big fan of kind of folklore, British folklore, Gothic. We do British horror. We do horror in this country really well. We always have done. And because I'm not the biggest fan of zombies and slasher films and things like that, I much prefer this kind of supernatural and playing with folklore and playing with history and stuff like that. And I also like psychological horror as well. And so I really like that the Liam Gavin, the writer and director of this, has clearly done his homework. Yeah, he's clearly researched the occult and that side of things. So the ritual that they're trying to perform in the film is called the Abramelin Operation, which is kind of something like to do with Gnosticism. I don't know a lot about occultism, but I've read a bit over the years, and I think it's something like Aleister Crowley would have performed. And so there's clearly there's lots of written work out there about this stuff, and so he is using actual rituals and spells and magic and things like that. So I like that part of it, and obviously there's lots of like imagery in there too. But I was kind of thought it was going. So is he into that stuff? Is he not into that stuff? Is he fooling her? Is he trying to lead her along? Because there's obviously a lot of kind of domination stuff going on there, abuse of power, and there's a couple of quite creepy sexual moments as well. And I thought it might go more that route and become maybe more psychological, which I was really rooting for. Like we said, we're not going to speak about spoilers. It didn't end up there at all. It kind of went the route I was hoping it wouldn't go.
The thing is, it's a lot of...
But then again, that's just because I've seen a lot of horror. That I have a lot to compare to, and I just personally didn't like where it went.
I think, that there's a lot of build-up, and he really puts her through the ringer.
Oh, yeah.
As far as going, because when these rituals and things don't work the first time, they have to start all over again, and some of them involve her sitting in the same place for like 2 days without food and water, and but all of that, if it had just ended up being in one of their heads or something. That I think I wouldn't have liked that. It went where their aim. It's difficult to talk about it without spoiling it, but it ended up where I wanted it to. I felt that was the natural place for it to end up. Personally.
I didn't mean I wanted it to like be in one of their heads and anything like some illusion that hasn't happened. But I mean more kind of about that power play between a man and a woman. I thought that's a really interesting, especially at the times we live in. I think that's a really interesting dynamic for a kind of, and to kind of line it with this kind of strange occult world. I thought would have been really interesting, because that really is, the whole power play between two people, whether man and woman or woman and woman or man and man, is finding that root in. A lot of these kind of psychopaths or sociopaths, they need to find a root in, and using something like the occult. I thought, well, that's an interesting way in, especially if you're leeching on someone who's vulnerable like that. Then someone who's looking for her son, who wants to find the son, and because we all know that whole. We don't all know, but some of us don't believe in things like mediums or seances, and I think you could play with that whole is spirituality real or is it not real? And I thought it was going to go that way. It didn't, and I mean, I guess if you've seen the film, you know where it ends up, and if you haven't seen the film, you possibly know where I maybe think it's going to end up. For me, that didn't work, and that's not to say that stuff doesn't. I don't always dislike that kind of stuff in films. I do like that stuff in horror films, but I just personally because I thought the two of them, Steve Oram is really good in this. I wasn't so behind Catherine Walker all the time, really. But she's fine as an actor, no, totally fine. I just the characterization of her, I wasn't totally behind. It just felt like, and then because there was, like you said, there was quite a lot of lying going on, which kind of why are you lying to him? What's the point in that?
Well, I think what she obviously, I think. Again, it's difficult to talk about it without spoiling it. But what she really wants out of it, she doesn't think that he would help her if she told the truth, and I think that's ultimately why she holds things back.
It just came across a little bit like, when you're in school and like, a group of girls will get together to do the Ouija board, but they don't really read into what you should and what you shouldn't do about it, and it's like, do this and do that, and then before you know, you've set.
Well, I think she's kind of blinded
demons
by her, desire.
Her desire to see her son and her love for her son and everything, I suppose. So yeah.
So she's just prepared. She just, I think. You get a hint at the start of the film that she's obviously had, psychological problems, and we see her sister at the start, trying to talk her out of this, and she even kind of resents her sister for having children, for still having children and having that life that she no longer has. Which
again, that reminded me a lot like the film we did last Halloween, The Haunting. She reminded me a lot like Eleanor in that, because she was, a damaged woman who's seeking something she's lost, and that's when then you start you can veer into psychological horror, and which you didn't really get too much in this film of. I didn't think. Well, maybe you did.
The ending. We get it.
Didn't like the ending. But that's okay. It's not like the ending. And to be annoyed because when the film is such a good build-up.
Well, yeah.
And there's some really, there's some really great cinematography in it. Who's the
Cathal
Waters?
Yeah,
something like that.
Apparently, he always wanted to do a horror film. This was the first one he'd done, but he doesn't actually like watching horror films.
Okay, because there's some really beautiful cinematography in there. There's a couple of obviously. So oddly, the film is filmed in Ireland but set in Wales. Mm-hmm. Not sure why they don't look the same. But there are some obviously nice sweeping, the shots of, because they are in the middle of nowhere, so you've got shots of mountains and hillsides and roads that just kind of go into nowhere or loop round on themselves. And then, but there's also a couple of scenes in the house which look like paintings. There was one shot that stood out for me in particular when it just cuts back and he's sitting on a couch and she's sitting next to him, and I think it's quite a lot of red in the shot, and it just looked like it almost looked like a Renaissance painting. It was those kind of colours, and I thought the cinematography was like spot on.
Yeah.
And the music too, which was done by Ray Harman, I thought that was really good, really quite ominous. It was it wasn't too in your face. Some of these horror scores can sometimes be a little bit in your face, and it was kind of synthy. But I thought it was
quite subtle, and it helped ramping up the tension.
It did get a little bit annoying and repetitive by the end of the film, I have to say. But I thought for the most part it was good, and I really like. And that's kind of what annoys me with a lot of modern horror films. Is they have some really interesting ideas, really interesting concepts. They start off really well, nice location. I mean, for me, it's kind of perfect. It's two very small cast, isolated place. It's lonely, vulnerable. It is creepy. I have to say there are moments in the film when it generally felt quite eerie at times.
I mean, I'd seen it before, and even watching it again the other day, certain scenes, the hairs are like standing up on the back of my neck because it is just really. Yeah, there's just it's one of these films like maybe The Witch and The Babadook and things like that, where there's just a constant sense of dread that builds because something bad is going to happen probably, and it's not going to be good, and creepy things happen. You think, this is slowly building to something, and it just works so well.
I just felt it was nice. I felt it was going a completely other direction, and because it didn't come to that conclusion, I was let down by it. And it's okay to be let down when you are rooting for a film all the way through.
Overall, you enjoyed it.
I wouldn't watch it again. It wasn't. It's not. No, I didn't. I really enjoyed the beginning. I really enjoyed the setup. I think the setup worked fine, but because the ending was such a letdown, I couldn't put myself through that again. No.
Fair enough.
Sorry.
Well, when I first, I saw it on Film 4, I think last Halloween, they showed it, or, in October. And, I was just absolutely blown away. I'd never heard of it, but, it sounded good, so I watched it, and, absolutely, I loved it. Loved it. I think it's in my top 10 horror films now.
Really?
Yeah, I really
Of all time?
Yeah, maybe I haven't seen enough horror films, I don't know. But, I really, really, really liked it, and, it just wasn't what I was expecting at all, and
I mean, this reminded me of Ghost Stories again, which had interesting setup. Yes, we're covering territory we've seen time and time again, but there were kind of moments, and there was actually one of the segments of Ghost Stories did kind of delve into kind of the occult and British folklore and things like that. But again, and we differ on that one as well. The ending just fell flat. We've been there, we've done it so many times. And yes,
this is the thing. I obviously haven't seen these films where it's been done before, so it's all new to me. And
again, this is the trouble when you're living in 2018. You've got nearly 100 odd years of films beforehand that have done all this before, and to kind of tread new ground and to be totally original is hard. I'm not saying everyone should be totally original every time. It's very hard, but. Just I don't know.
Give it a watch and let us know what you think of the ending. So sorry, I thought you'd like it more than you did. I apologise.
Liked the build-up, loved the build-up.
Yep, and the performances. Well, one of the performances. Let's just not go there again.
No, Steve Oram. He's good. I like him.
Yeah,
I like his acting. I think his performance in this was great, and his performance in Sightseers is just. That is a film that works. So that's a British. It's not really a horror film, but it's a British folklorish type of film, which totally works. And the ending, love it, completely. I mean, that film I've seen about 4 or 5 times now. I absolutely love that film. And I think that's one of the best kind of British strange films that's come out over the last few years, definitely. And he's in it.
Yep, he is.
Yeah. Anyway,
do
you have this on DVD?
Yes.
Okay. So I imagine you can, if you want to see it, you can see it.
Because it's not an old film. I think it's on Netflix in the US. Not sure about the UK, but I imagine it probably is. There's only a DVD in the UK, annoyingly, as it is like it's an Irish, British, whatever film. It's only DVD, no Blu-ray. Who buys DVDs anymore? Don't know. Savages.
Occasionally I buy the odd DVD.
Well, I suppose if
you can't get it on Blu-ray.
If you can't, but it is on Blu-ray in the States from
so you can
Scream
see
Factory.
You can see it out in the States?
You can. It is Region A, unfortunately, so you need to be able to play that over in the UK. But it's got some nice features on it. It's got some interviews with the director and the director of photography and the main actors as well.
Deleted scenes?
Yep, a few deleted scenes, yep. So, not tons of stuff, but, some interesting little tidbits from them. And, so if you want it, if you can play Region A, then that's what I would suggest you get. It wasn't too expensive to pick up. But, the DVD is not hard to find if you're not fussy like me. So, I don't know what features that's got. But, again, if you've got it on Netflix, I'm pretty sure it's on there, so check it out on there.
And that's US Netflix. We don't know.
I'm pretty confident it's in the US. I'm not 100% on UK, but if you've got Netflix, just search, and then you'll find whether it's on there or not.
Yeah. So that was A Dark Song, and as always, if you enjoyed the video, let us know in the comments below.
Yep, and subscribe up there and watch some of our other videos over there. And come and join us on Twitter and Facebook to chat about movies. And don't forget to come back next week for another video.